So today I wanted to talk about perceptions, perception of obstacles, and our perception of obstacles can make a big difference in how we see and understand and move through the course of our day. Simeon Lindstrom said the tragedy of life is not death, but what we let die inside of us while we're still living. And that's all because of the views and the perceptions that we have around the obstacles that we necessarily have to confront in daily life. So some people see obstacles like a puzzle to be solved. They really want to get into it, like, why did this happen, and they engage with it. Some see obstacles as an opportunity to grow. That's a learning experience. What can I learn from this? Others see obstacles as a threat, and others see obstacles as meaning that they cannot succeed. So your view of barriers to achieving your goals really affects how you react to every circumstance in your life. If you see the world as being against you or mean, or as meaning that you fail, then you're likely to be overwhelmed. We get overwhelmed with painful thoughts, and difficult emotions arise, and our goals become blocked, not by the obstacle. Our goals become blocked by our perception of the obstacle. That's the whole thing that I'm trying to get across, that life is how we view it. And so the trainings that the Buddha give us are designed to help us to, Tony Robbins got the credit for that change your state. When I was back in my heyday in the world, it was always how to turn every opportunity into a sale, and so we'd all go to these Tony Robbins conferences, and he'd pump us all up. But the thing is, what he was teaching was actually true. I mean, however we choose to use it, or in whatever area of life we choose to use it. But he would always, he would have us, and it was actually an antidote to, what do you call that when it arises? It's a kind of panic attack. Yeah. So he said, like, when you have a panic attack, change your state. He said, just hit yourself right here. And people did it. And it immediately arrested the panic attack. And so that's how he really became famous, from that one tag, change your state, and when he gave the hack for overcoming a panic attack. But it's so true. And even the Buddha helps us to see that perhaps we don't realize that when we experience thoughts, when we're faced with an obstacle, something co-arises in the body with that. So there's like maybe a sense of fear arises. Well, fear is also arising in the body. It's not just a mental construct, or it's not just a mental feeling, but it's also a bodily feeling. Distrust is a bodily feeling. You experience it somewhere viscerally in the body. Shame is a body experience as well as a mental experience. So a lot of times we're trying to work on changing our mind about the mental experience. And so, yes, change your state. But this was designed to bring you back to your body, to put you back into your body and recognize something in the body was being triggered as a result of whatever was being said, or whatever was being observed, or whatever, was occurring externally. There was something internally occurring, and that's what your stronger reaction was to the feeling that was arising. So fear tells us that we need to escape a situation, right? That there's danger. Or it tells you to prepare, get ready. You must overpower who you perceive as your enemy. And so a close cousin to fear is the sense of needing to control every situation. be in control of every situation, dominate others. So that's a sign of fear, but that's an internally arising conclusion that we impute on others, and then we see them as the enemy or our combatant. Mm-hmm. And so these kinds of physical sensations, I would even say emotion, physical energy in motion, get in the way of our capacity to overcome obstacles. And so the Buddha gave us two practices, one to do on the pillow and one to do off the pillow. But both of them have to actually be done. We can't just think about them. We have to actually do them. And whenever we're trying to apply an antidote, when we're trying to neutralize something, that means that we're coming from the other end with it. So it is necessarily an opposite, and there's going to be a force applied, if you will, towards that thing. So when we're doing things that we feel are the most gentle and self-nurturing, oftentimes they're the exact opposite of what we should be doing. And we can all agree that the world is just going mad. Up is down, in is out. But we might want to consider where we're moving in terms of helping each other overcome these self-manufactured obstacles, the stories that we tell ourselves when something is happening, when we view it through our history, or we view it through some event or unfortunate event that we had, or because somebody looks like somebody who did something to us in the past, or in these kinds of ways, we are creating a story around what is happening right here that renders us unable to actually experience the moment. And a lot of our psychology is around easing into an okayness with creating these stories. The problem with that is that we don't develop, if I wanted to, let's say that I wanted to lift this bell, and I'd been sick. I'd been in bedridden for 3 months, and I go to try to pick it up. I don't even have the strength maybe to pick it up. Okay, let's say this weighs 10 pounds. So how do I get up to being able to lift 10 pounds? I might have to start with the pink band. Is it Panya Deepa? Like the pink band, just gradually beginning to put my muscles back to work, and then I'll graduate to the green band, and then I'll go to the purple band, and after I finish with the purple band, then I'm going to come here and I'm going to be able to expect to pick it up. But there was a gradual building up of the muscles, of the capacity to pick up this bell. And it's the same way. We have to be able to endure things without feeling that we're so fragile that we can't go through anything. So the Buddha gives us practices to do that build us up in these areas. And so he tells us when someone is calling you names, when one is yelling at you and disrespecting you in front of others, he said that's an opportunity to lift that 1 pound weight, that 2 pound weight. He says, instead of feeling like you just can't take it, you can't tolerate it, he said, let that one who is losing his mind have his say, and you hold steady with yours. He said, in that way, you consider that one your kind teacher. And it's in these ways that we build up our capacity. If we are going to have to be able to talk with one another in this world. We're going to have to be able to overlook a fault. We're going to have to, be able to tolerate a slight. We're going to have to, because that's the only way we will survive. But anything that's said sets somebody off. Something that's done cannot recognize that the person who does that is suffering. If you think that action was an unreasonable action, if you think it was an unbeneficial action, if you think it was an action that wouldn't bring good fruit, then you have to necessarily tie it into your thinking with something that is tied up or bound up with suffering in that person, you see. So, but when they say that, your own personal suffering just jumps the hoop on them, and now you no longer see suffering in that act. You only see or tap into your own suffering rather than that person's suffering. And so he says we should see others as ourselves, see others as oneself. So these kinds of practices give us a certain stability, because little by little we'll become stronger and stronger and able to not lose our grace and our dignity when outside situations arise. Now, I'm not talking about, so don't even ask the question, because that's the egoic mind. Like, well, what if somebody's beating you? Should you just let them beat you? You understand, like apply a little wisdom to this conversation, and don't let our clinging to our, we have this thing about rights. It's my right to do this and my right to do that, But you can see where that takes us. That doesn't take us to a firm and yielding place. It's something that strengthens the ego and contaminates the environment. So we have to know what is right view and what is not. And sometimes we get confused because the voices or the information are coming from credible sources, from sources where we get some of our information about how to live life and how to walk in life. But that's why we have to have an inner guide, an inner integrity, an inner voice, and be able to trust that voice, because we have disciplined ourselves to not have to make the resolution always be okay for me. I don't have to always win. So we live in a country where winning, or appearing to win, is everything. And it becomes difficult when this is the constant mantra coming at us from the world without even realizing it. We take this in all the time. And it affects our behavior, our views, and it molds our sense of of a concrete egoic self that needs to be defended. So I'd like to ask you to do the work that he recommended off the pillow. I mean, you could even make it, a game, but it's not a game. But you understand what I mean. I mean that when that tendency rises up, to that combatant kind of energy, can you recognize that's arising? And look for the accompanying physical disturbance. And sometimes we can see it and we can know it, but we just can't do anything about it at that time. Because maybe that's like asking you to pick up the 10-pound weight before the 2-pound weight. But just recognizing it is the beginning. Recognizing it. It's the beginning, but it's not the end. In the beginning, we might recognize it, but we couldn't do anything about it. Then he says, go back and reflect on it. Think of what you could have done that would have brought a more fruitful outcome. Sometimes we have to decide whether we want to lose a skirmish to win the war, lose a battle to win the war. Or do we want to win the battle and lose the war? Warring against these unwholesome, unbeneficial mental states that are constantly rising, some from inside of us and some as a result of our erroneous way of tendency, So we have these habitual tendencies, the ways we handle things. But he says if you want to have a new tendency, then it doesn't just happen and so the old one is moved out. You have to gradually, develop and establish that new tendency. So it takes time to do that. That's why when we're on the opposite end of that, we have to allow people time to do that. So the strong should bear the infirmities of the weak. And let the weak say, I am strong. That's the two sides. So you apply one thing when you're on one side of that equation. You apply something else, a different way of looking at it and being at it when you're on the other side. It's like I was talking about the robe. The robe should inspire respect for the Dharma and should encourage one to practice well. But the one in the robe shouldn't be sashaying around like, look at me and I'm aloof and I'm greater than you and all of these kinds of things. That one should consider the robe just as covering from the elements, from the wind, from the rain, something to take the robe off and spread out and lay down on. So it's the same robe, but it's from which side, recognition of it is being approached. So this idea of toughening, I remember when Pannavati was really into Kung Fu, and his hand, if he just set his hand down like that, it felt like a brick, because they would go through these practices of toughening, and he just lightly lay his hand, and it was like, yeah, But if I tried to do that, I'd break my hand. As a matter of fact, I remember when I first met him, I'd come out of karate, and the style was called Kenpo, the way of the fist. And I looked at Pannavati slighter than he is now, and I went to his class, and I was like, yeah, So he asked for a volunteer. Like I'd seen all of these kung fu. We'd go to tournaments all around the country, and I'm sure we passed each other, but I didn't know him in that decade. But the kung fu guys, they were like beautiful. They would be wearing these red silk, that Chinese stuff, red silk scarves, and they'd be dancing with their swords, and it was like just so elegant and so beautiful. I said, but they can't fight, because I didn't see them fight in tournaments. Then he tells me they couldn't fight in tournaments because they only knew how to make deadly moves. That's Pannavati's story. So I can't say because it wasn't my style, but in the tournaments, we went to duke it out, to battle it out. So I meet him a decade later, and I come to his dojo, and he's now teaching the internal art. He's not fighting anymore and that sort of thing. He's teaching about health and all of this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, well, we didn't learn any of that in karate. We just learned about outer force, And he's trying to tell me something about inner force and chi. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I said, I remember you guys from the tournament days. And so he finishes his talk and he says, now I'd like to demonstrate. And he doesn't ask for, a volunteer. He comes over for me. So I get up because I'm ready. I get up and he says, so I'll throw a punch, and I throw a punch and he hooks me with a chin out and takes me down immediately to the floor. Just something as simple as that. That's all he did. He just caught that, and there it was. And I'm on the floor. And so he goes around and he finishes his talk with one hand while he's holding me in a chin out with the other hand. And I mean for about 5 minutes, just dragging me all on the floor. But after that, but I recognized a certain mastery and a power that was invisible. And he became my teacher. And so it's kind of like that. We have this outer push and pull, and we think that that's what protects us. But it's not that. It is the internal power. And if we cultivate and develop the right internal power, we will be impervious to all the darts, to all the arrows that come our way. And we can walk and not be weary. We can run and not faint. And so I like to leave you with that as the external. As what we do off the pillow. But now what we do on the pillow is something entirely different. He gives us a way of coming to the absolute stilling of thought. I mean, all of these notions and ideas you hold in the moment about what is happening, what should be happening, how should I respond, what will be, the result of this. These kinds of thoughts that are constantly going on in our mind. And he says the practice is through non-action and through non-effort, to allow them to fall away. And something happens when they fall away. That's where the fear is resolved. That's where the anger dissipates. That's where the sense of mistrust evaporates. But it's also the place where our creativity is unleashed. It's the place where our foresight emerges. It's the place where our essential essence is unleashed into the world. So this world is the result of the essence that's being released into it. It's like if gas gets released into the room, everybody will be affected. And you don't even have to necessarily smell the gas, right? They put an odor agent into it so that we can smell the gas, because for us, it's odorless. And so we're constantly being infected without even realizing it. And so he says, half of the thoughts we have, they're not even ours. We pick them up as we pass somebody else. We pick them up along the way, unconsciously. And they concretized into conscious thoughts. And so this is a way of breaking that up and allowing it to simply fall away. So then that means that meditation then has no place for a separate identity who stands against someone else. It has no place for struggle. It has no place for the ego. It is a place that we can begin to sense a kind of harmony of everything. And it's a place where we can take off our armor against the world. So you could say that meditation then is the death of the ego. So on both sides, he's bringing us to an end of the self as we know it, concrete, needing to be defended. And that energy is freed up in creative ways to be used for the betterment of life, our life, and the lives of others. So it's in this way that the Dharma is not a religion in the sense of a worshiping kind of religion, but it is in the sense of what do you ascribe worth to? How do we really make life meaningful? And what do we want to do? How do we want to seize the essence of this precious human life? As a Christian, I would love to sing those songs. I ain't going to study war no more. I'm going to lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, And it was like a wonderful thought. I'm like, but exactly how do I do that? Because my heart was saying that, my head was saying, like, you better be careful. My head was always telling me, was always feeding me about a need to protect, a need to defend, a need to be cautious of, a need to... And that's what grew in me in abundance. And I was so happy to find the Dharma, because it's how you get into it is you got to turn and go the other way. And I've been towards facing my fears and facing myself and really looking at me, not at you, at me. And that's our practice, to continually fold the lens back, looking at oneself. And what helps us to be able to do it is sitting in that meditation, just allowing ourselves to find one object that we can focus on. It can be the breath because it's always with you. And just breathing in and breathing out, you start to lose the distinction between inside and outside. Not in the beginning, but somewhere in the process, if we don't let our attention become diverted. There becomes like this unification, the inside with the outside, the in-breath and the out-breath. And we don't know what to do because we're used to doing something with ourselves. Even when we're sitting still doing nothing, we're at least thinking about something, you know. But he says, just experience. That inhalation, that life-giving inhalation, and the exhalation. And sometimes we take a deep breath and sometimes a shallow one. Sometimes it's a long breath, sometimes it's a short one. Sometimes it's subtle and sometimes it's harsh. And sometimes we pay attention when we start the inhalation or when we start the exhalation. But he said, stay with that whole body of breath. The complete inhalation and exhalation. And begin to notice how it heightens your awareness of what's going on inside as opposed to outside. Notice how you start to think of it not so much as I am breathing, just there is breathing, or there is the breath, or there is the air. And it doesn't seem personal at all. And experience what happens as one settles into the rhythm of the breath and the experience of the coolness of the air as it enters the nostrils and the warmth as it leaves. Notice how much more we are aware of pulses in the body, feeling throughout the body. And how in this simple act of breathing, it seems as if the whole body becomes harmonized. There's a settling down of body, and a release of tightness around thought in the mind. This is simply what it means to lay aside covetousness and grief for the world. And this is how simple it is. Turning your attention to one thing and holding it there. And it takes time to get used to just doing this. It's like if you take a stick and you stir up water that has soil at the bottom, then the water becomes muddy. But if you just sit it down, put down your stick, you watch the surface settle down, then a little below that, and a little below that, and a little below that. Before you know it, all of the dirt has settled down to the bottom, and that water is still and clear. So this is how clarity comes about. So when we need clarity, we have to get still. We have to cultivate a mind of kindness towards others, overcoming any sense of humiliation, disgust, offense. Choosing not to engage, choosing, I say, not to engage those thoughts. As we experience the purifying way leading to our highest states of mind. And our body responds and reacts to this decision. And chemicals are released in the body that reinforce the decision and help produce a state of calm. And you recognize this in different ways. Sometimes it's a great sense of peacefulness. Sometimes it's a joy, just an inner joy. Sometimes it manifests in colors swirling. beneath the closed eyelids, tingling in the body. All of these are simply signs that we are becoming still. And we're giving up our need to be right. We're giving up attachment to our view. We can have a view, but we don't have to be attached to the view. It's the attachment to it that causes our pain. And this right here is enough to practice for right now. Just stay right in this place, keeping this experience holding it, not trying to reach for anything else. Just becoming acquainted with this state. This should be our normal state. I was sitting in just equipose. And when I came out, there was an insight into what just happened. And these words rose up in me, tenderly, oh tenderly. I fold into stillness, and silence awakens inside of me. Easily, so easily, beauty and kindness, resilience and mirth come alive. Radiantly, yes, radiantly, my heart opens wide. Scales fall from my eyes, and now I see that freedom can only be found inside of me. Gracefully, oh gracefully, compassion arises for friend and for foe deep inside of me. Peacefully, so peacefully, resistance and craving and fear deep inside waft away. Happily, yes, happily, a lightness of mind and delight of the heart comes spontaneously. That freedom can only be found inside of me.